Okay, welcome everyone. So, in last week's episode, I said we should totally have that conversation next week because I think that's interesting. And so, this episode is where we get into that conversation. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about metrics, metrics in relation to what are the different metrics that we've used, what are the metrics that people talk about and advise us to use, what are some of the pros and cons about that. And then we sort of loop back a little bit to last week's conversation because Rich starts to get some his ideas about some of the things he's trying to figure out starts to evolve as we're going back and forth on the topic. So yeah, please have a listen. If you have any thoughts or reactions or questions, comments or concerns, please hit us up on the usual places. Comment down below the video or on LinkedIn, wherever, and let us know what you think. But yeah, enjoy the episode. It's a good one.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Vernon Richard Show. How you doing, Vern?
I am okay. Just recovering from massive disrespect from my children, but I say children, one in particular. But I'm okay. It's Sunday. Oh yeah, we're recording on a Sunday, aren't we? That's a bit different.
It is,
Recording on a
it's
Sunday.
different for us. Yeah.
Usually we do a Wednesday.
Both our
It's a
teams
Sunday
played yesterday, and both won for once. Oh, woo!
Yeah,
and then
absolutely
we'll move on now. So we're both in good spirits, but not sure about the topic. So the topic sorted itself out this week, right? Because at the end of the last episode, if you've not listened to it, we were discussing what the hell is QA, what is QE, what is testing, what is the job we all do? Does our work we do actually fit the job titles that we have? And that then concluded to how do you know you're doing either of these things well? So even if you don't agree with some of these terms, right? Because I saw a LinkedIn post yesterday actually that I'd never seen this tone before, and I didn't know the person, but it was like, oh, all these, I can't remember what woke. He called people, but he called me woke, right? Not directly, but inferred. He was like, all these people going on about QE like it's something new, just giving it a different name. It's QA. It's been QA for 20 years. And it was, you know, when you read stuff on LinkedIn and you're like, I want to bite, but I also can't be bothered biting because I'm going to be in a discussion for a long time and I can't be bothered doing that. But yeah, so that's kind of that's I'm not trying to get derailed by that, but yeah, it just came back in my head.
Now you got me wondering. So, Chris Armstrong made a joke with me the other day. I wonder if he was. I thought he was joking about something else. You might have been joking. You might have seen this post. I haven't seen this post.
I don't know. Yeah, I probably can't find it. It wasn't someone I was connected with, and it was at the time when I was like, I don't have the energy to get involved in this right
now. Although I want to see the post. If anyone knows the post, send it. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah. But on that topic, it was like, okay, you've got all these terms, words, whatever they are, right? Let's assume they all exist and we all agree what they are. How do you know you're doing either of them well? What metrics could you have to help you know that you're doing QA well, QE well, or testing well, or maybe even automation as a subset of testing, like maybe those four kind of topics? How would you know that you're doing these things well?
Well, so when I started out, when I were a lad, we would spend a lot of time talking about. We would count a lot of things because everything testing back then looked like test cases, and so we would count stuff.
The more you had, the better you were doing, right?
Literally, you took the words out of my mouth. More is always better. So it was, higher. The higher than that number was, the better. And it didn't matter whether these were automated or not. The higher the number, the better. That was the underlying principle. And then things evolve and you start talking about things like, well, what coverage do we have? And that could be in terms of the code. It could be in terms of functionality and things like this. And then another amazing one is bugs. So how many bugs do we have? So counting seemed to be the prevailing methodology for testing. I don't know what it was like for you in your in your early roles, but that's what it was like for me.
Those
Counting stuff.
two, yeah, those two were definitely. What was it called? It has an acronym, right? Defect Detection Rate, DDR. Well, that's what
Defect
we used to
detection rate.
call
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but then that was also interesting because that also sometimes got factored into how many per day and how many per week and how many per sprint, right? Which is
That's what it is.
baffling
Yeah.
when I think about QE because you almost you almost wanted a terrible quality practices because then you found more
Mm.
bugs, right? And then that made you look better because you found
Well,
more bugs. But
it's a
obviously,
really good point.
yeah. And what was the other one though? Sorry, test cases was another one, right? But
Mm-hmm.
now in my current philosophy, and again, I know we want to go on a journey with it, but now I'm like, well, even though I said I'd done one test case, I now know from my learnings around exploratory testing and testing as a whole that I probably ran 50, 60, 70, 80 tests whilst running that one test case because
Mm-hmm.
the human brain just read that as instructions. But I was checking loads of things as I was going. I was like, oh, I might just go over there. I might have a look here. I was pretty bad at following test cases, right? Which is why when someone introduced me to exploratory testing, I was like, well, this is just genius. This is exactly what I've been doing. But like, I wish back then that I'd known that I was doing that because then I would have written 80 test cases, right? Because that would have, made me look better, right? That's how it feels. But yeah, those two were definitely strong at the forefront. And how many test cases you could do a day? That was another one, which again is nonsense when you think about it. Like,
Well, yeah. I mean, if we think back to what we were talking about in the last episode, we were talking about because and jumping and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you would well, I say were the thing you are currently, you know, noodling on and trying to figure out inside and outside of work because that's how your brain works.
yeah,
Is we're in this new era of tooling. We've got a lot of machine learning and AI and LLMs and all this stuff that a lot of us, pointing at me, are getting our heads around. But it's enabling, potentially enabling, unlocking new conversations about the work that we do.
absolutely.
And you're saying, and it sounds like you're kind of in a bit of a trap because you're saying, well, I don't want to talk about testing because the thing I'm talking about is not that. And I don't think I want to talk about QA because the thing I want to talk about is not that. I might not
It's
even want to be talking about QE necessarily because it might not be
yeah,
that. But all the language I've got right now it falls into one of those buckets. And so if I start talking about whatever this new thing is that you're trying to figure out, but you use the language of testing, let's say, because that's a unbelievably overloaded term these
yeah,
days. As soon as you start using that language, people are like, "Oh, that's testing. See you later. Bye." And I know what this is. And you're like, "No, no, no, it's not that. It's
yeah.
not that."
Well, just to break down what Vernon's saying there about my thinking inside and outside of work is there's there's certain changes like happening in my like thinking, triggered from the community, triggered from work, and it's whether you're a big fan of AI or not, or whether you think AI is amazing or whatever, right? And I don't even I now when you mention the buzzword, everyone's like, oh god, not AI again, right? But it's changing the way we build software massively from every point of the SDLC, right? Whether that's generating requirements, code, test case ideas, test
Mm-hmm.
strategies, right? Whatever it is you're using it to generate, but then also how you go about testing software that has Gen AI or even AI, probably mostly Gen AI, but has that technology inside it, right? So it's changing the way we work. And, just the
Mm-hmm.
same as things like DevOps and pipelines and other stuff like change the way we work, it's happening again. But then
Yeah.
when I try and think about some of the things that you would need to do to achieve quality, right? So quality is always the overlying word. Whether underneath that's QA or QE or testing or whatever, we talk a lot about quality. But if I wanted to train a bunch of people to help us achieve a good level of quality, which most people would put in the bracket of QE,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I also need to teach these people how to test.
Mm-hmm.
I might need to teach these people how to think about metrics and other things. So I'm now trying to reverse engineer is the best word I have for it to a set of skills and a set of tasks and a set of practices, as opposed to saying this is the 10 practices of QE, this is the 10 practices of QA. I do care about the term, but I almost don't. Right? I care more about the skills and the tasks and the different hats that you would have to wear, or that I've worn over my 20-year career. Which ones are relevant now, and where are the gaps in those hats? That's what I'm trying to get to. I know we're going to talk about metrics, but that's what's currently going on. But then that takes me back to, if I'm going to teach someone, how do I help them know they're doing it well? Or how do I even know that we're doing quality well if I don't have any of the metrics that exist in QE or QA or in testing? Or do I need all of them to exist? Or do I need new ones? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm getting you to help me.
So where I wanted to go was think about how do we measure the testing stuff?
Yeah.
Work, not stuff, good grief. The testing work that we do. What are we measuring that tells us that the testing is successful or not? And the definitions that we were bandying around, or certainly I was bandying around in the last episode, were testing is about detecting bugs, and QA is about preventing bugs, and QE is about doing both of those things in the service of increasing the quality. So what metrics tell us that we're doing a good job, or what can we measure or observe, or whatever, the correct description is? What can we do that will tell us we're doing a good job of detecting bugs? So,
well, this feels like
this is where
one.
This is where I
maybe I
talked
think
about. Go on.
For detecting bugs, I can think of two.
Yeah.
One is how many bugs do we find, right? I know it's not a good metric, but it's a metric. And you could argue that you could count the different severity and priority, but that's a whole nother conversation of what the hell those words mean. And then the second one is how many bugs are in production. So counting them the ones we find, but counting the ones we miss from live, as in, come through customer support tickets or comments on social media or whatever it is, right? Whether your app lives, how many do you miss? Those are the two that come to mind with bugs specifically.
I was thinking also about where did you look and how hard you
that?
coverage.
Okay, yeah.
So think about what coverage did you have? If you.
How long have we got in this podcast today, Vernon?
Man,
we're recording at 2:00 on Sunday for anyone listening, so we've got hours coverage. I might have to stand up for this one.
do you know what I mean? Get the standing desk going. This could be a long one.
Coverage. Well, yeah. Anyway, go on. Sorry, coverage.
But that could be one, right? Coverage is, you could have 10 areas of functionality or whatever, or I don't know, thousands upon thousands of lines of code, and you kind of say, well, if we've looked over 60% of the lines of code, we may or may not feel good about that. If we've, checked 6 of the 10 features, and it's the 6 most important or most used ones, we might feel comfortable with that, or not. Either way.
I know I'm joking about spending time on this, but you're triggering me.
I'm triggering you.
Well, it says so coverage is a topic, right? And it's a topic. Everyone that makes no sense, Richard, right? But it's a topic, right? And
that's an episode on its own. Is probably right?
It's like coverage of what, right? So I've always twisted this around to say coverage of some model, right? But you've just said a few there. So lines of code is a very common model, right? You could argue it makes sense. You argue it doesn't make sense, right? But you could say you have 100% coverage. But most people who would say that would still admit they have issues, right? So, it's a metric and it's an approach, but is it actually as valuable as some people argue? But then you just said, we've checked. And I'm not picking on the word checking as in checking and testing, right? I'm not doing that. But you said you've checked 6 out of 10. But now what the hell does that mean? What does saying you've checked 6 out of 10? Have you tested happy path, negative paths, all the negatives paths you can think of? Is it coverage of
I've said
a flow chart of that feature?
I
Like,
said, we've got 10 features that we care about, and we've checked 6 of them. That's what I said.
that's what I'm asking you. What does check 6 of them mean?
Whatever you want. That's the thing. That's the thing. But that is the thing with coverage. I
Yeah, I know.
heard. Oh, what was his
I know.
name?
That's what it's.
David Evans was it? First time I heard this years ago. I think is it David Evans? I'm sure it's David Evans.
Yeah, David Evans was
He
the
was
speaker.
going. He said, and I love using this example. He goes, I've achieved 100%. Like I've traveled all over the world. I've achieved 100% Earth coverage. I said, oh, that's amazing. He
Yeah.
goes, yes, because I've been to the UK in the Northern Hemisphere, and I've been to Australia in the Southern Hemisphere. 2 hemispheres, 100% coverage, done. And like, what?
I was expecting that to
But
go a different way. I was expecting to say you did it blindfolded and didn't see anything. That's what, when the way you and you're sharing that story. But you're still 100%
yeah,
coverage, right? But yeah,
yeah,
no, you're right.
he's
And
achieved.
but I
So
think
it is,
like,
it
but I
is,
don't. It is. I don't want
but
to get hung up on coverage, but
it's there, and people
it
do
is.
use it.
They do. And I'm
Yeah,
agreeing that is a metric without a doubt. It is a metric, but I think
yeah.
that triggers a conversation of coverage of some model. That model needs very clearly defining and explaining, because when you come into these meetings or you make jokes like you just said there, like, oh, we've got 90% coverage. If I'm on that team, or I think anyone who's got a
Oh my
critical
god.
mind would be like, of
Yeah.
what? Like, you're immediately getting asked that. And if you can't answer it, that number becomes absolutely rubbish. Like, put it in the bin. It's trash. Right, I've got a bin somewhere. Where's my bin? Put it in here. It's absolute trash. Right, get it in. Yeah. So coverage.
So
Anyway, coverage is another one.
so we've got
So
cases, bugs, coverage. What there was another one. What did you mention?
we've got bugs in
Escape.
production. Yeah, bugs
Yeah.
in prod. Or prod
Mm-hmm.
issues is probably another way of looking at it. But
Okay.
then is that a bit more broader than just testing, right? As in, there's lots of reasons prod goes down. There's infrastructure reasons, there's software
Well,
reasons, there's security
yeah.
reasons, like all that stuff. It does all those reasons come underneath testing. They might come under QE, but do they come under testing? They might come under
No, not all of
QA.
them. I mean, not
They might come underneath
maybe not
security
in the first
testing
instance. Well, yeah. Well, this is it. You
or
see. So,
performance testing or
oh god, this is going to be like a definition rabbit hole. Like this is just nightmare city. But yeah, we can agree that there are production issues that occur that you wouldn't have necessarily expected to find in your typical everyday functional testing. Perhaps, perhaps
yeah.
it all depends, on your definitions. But generally speaking, that would be a different kind of work, a different kind of testing. Still testing, as far as I'm concerned. But
I think so too. And I think again, like, joking about all those different types of testing, I feel, again, like talking about my challenge of unwrapping all these terms, right? I could easily unwrap all that back to testing, back to quality,
oh
by
yeah, hell yeah,
having
that
conversations
might work.
around what does good infra look like? What does this, what
Yeah,
does good look like in that? And then I could almost go back to that. And then if I was thinking of a strategy or a plan, you would work your way back again. But when it comes to testing, unless I've been explicitly not instructed, but unless I'm thinking around testing, like you said, functional testing, right? Am I testing the system, or am I testing the app, which is part of the system, or
yeah,
am I testing what is the system, right? A lot of people get hung up on the actual UI that you see, but obviously there's
mm-hmm,
a much wider system there, right? Are you on
mm-hmm.
AWS? Are you on a cloud? What other moving parts in there? Have you got something like Cloudflare stuck in the middle? Like, there's so many moving bits that I don't think a lot of people. I say I'm judging now. I don't know. I'm not sure. Let me put it in safe. That where's put me Michael Bolton safety language on. I'm not. I wonder how many people think of those kinds of risks when they're testing versus just
Not that
staying
many
in the feature
functional. Yeah,
functional, whatever you want to call that space. If I click the
mm-hmm,
buttons and I call the API, does stuff happen? But then I'm also
mm-hmm.
curious, like I could probably talk to some people at work. I wonder how much testing they're doing in that space versus just testing that, when we tell Terraform to spin up a machine is spun up and the ports I want are open. But are they testing that other ports aren't open?
Right.
I
What
don't know.
else
I've
is
never
happening?
really had to do that kind of testing extensively myself. But I wonder
Yeah.
how much, quote, whatever you'd want to call that, infrastructure testing actually does go on. Because a
Mhm.
lot of the time I see the infrastructure people wanting to run some smoke tests that make sure the app works. But
Mhm.
that's not really testing the infra, if you know what I mean. Like it's
Mm.
different. But yeah, maybe going off tangent a little bit. But then that falls back to, like I said, different, you know, I was trying to tie that back to thinking of quality at the start and thinking of risks. And are people thinking broader than just the functionality? I'm guessing that's what I'm trying to say. I don't
Mm.
know.
Yeah,
But
I don't know either.
what
But
about,
but
so
so
yeah, go on.
that's on the detection side, on the air quotes testing side, and then we've got prevention work. So the work we do to prevent bugs, which I was calling QA in the last episode.
Yeah. But
What
before we skip
metrics?
to that, do you not want to think of,
Oh, go
I
on.
think it might be worth just dropping automation into the testing topic, because I
Oh,
think a lot of
okay,
people have
okay,
metrics around that, such
okay.
as,
Yeah, yeah.
pass fail comes back to mind. Whereas with the test case one, it used to be more how many test cases have you ran for me. The kind of sometimes the sub narrative was how
Still
many
is.
passed and failed, but early on in my career, it was more a case of just how many of you churned through. Because after, if it failed, they would care more about the bug count than the
Yeah.
fact that so many tests failed. And then you'd get that whole, well, these these 10 test cases are blocked because of that bug. And like blah
Yeah,
blah blah, right?
yo,
You get all that
yeah.
conversation.
Jeez.
Um,
Yeah, man. Damn, man, Rich.
but with
You're into the archives
automation, I
there.
think you get a lot more of like, I know one I see is like pass rate. And I mean, how many times does that test pass? You get reliability, as in how, the flakiness score that a lot of these tools now calculate. And another one that you get in there, which I think ties to a wider topic personally, but people measure how long each test takes, which no one ever used to care about when I did it manually. Not saying they didn't care, but it wasn't
It
brought up a
wasn't
lot.
in the same way. I know what you mean. I know what
Yeah,
you mean.
but with an
Yeah.
automated test, it's like 10 minutes. Well, yeah, it
Yeah,
took me
yeah,
2
yeah,
hours to do
yeah.
it. Yeah, but 10 minutes automated. It's like, well, all right.
Yeah.
It's quicker than 2
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to be clear, everyone, I am not advocating for 10-minute
I'm
long
gonna say.
tests. I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
saying,
yeah.
just think, I'm exaggerating. Um, but I think
For
with
the people
automation, you
listening,
kind of get,
the look of horror in Rich's face just then was real.
but yeah, I think you get reliability, you get execution time, you kind of get pass fail. I think they're a bit more specific to automation. I think, which still at the moment, I think most people still class automation as testing, and
I mean,
you know,
I had lumped it in there. I'm not gonna lie, because flakiness would have
yeah,
been in there for me,
yeah.
and yeah, the execution time becomes particularly important when we're talking about test automation. I think they're the two that spring to mind immediately for me.
I'm
Probably
going to come back to another metric that's come in my head just as I'm writing that down, because I don't want to. I want to try and keep it in flow. But yeah,
okay.
execution time is a
Yeah,
massive one. But also,
yeah,
execution time did used to be a thing, but as a
yeah.
collective in
That's what
manual world.
that's what I meant. That's what I meant. It wasn't. We
Yeah,
didn't look at it in that finite per test
per
basis, but it was
test.
how
Yeah.
long will this cycle take?
Oh,
Planned cycles and all this kind of. This is like a trip down memory lane. This. Um.
And just to be clear, I want to say that it sounds like I'm mocking it, but it's just because I'm in a context that doesn't write test cases. I know many still exist and work in this space, and again, if it fits
Mhm.
your context, and context is one of the words I've written down to come back to at the end of this, like
Mm.
it's fine, it makes sense. It's just it's not something I do anymore, and it would be something I would not want to do, even if a context almost really suited it. I would be
Yeah.
literally fighting every urge in my body to like not go with it. But
Right.
anyway, let's go to QA. Let's go to QA. You were going to start
Well, I
with
wanted
QA.
to. What are the metrics? What can you measure in terms of preventing bugs? I immediately I was at some point during this conversation I was typing and searching away because it made me think of DORA metrics straight away.
Well, I've written DORA down, but more from a QE perspective. But I had a massive
Yeah.
long conversation with Janet Gregory about this a long, long time ago
Oh,
now, and it always
okay.
sticks in my head. And I
Is
can't
that why you
always
just started
remember the
giggling?
specific. Yeah, because I can't remember the specifics of it. But it was like you're asking me to measure something that doesn't exist. So, and I can't prove it. I can't prove I prevented the bug because this, like, I'm trying to not get meta here for everyone, right? I
Mm,
can't prove I prevented a bug because in my head, the way my brain works is I found a bug. I didn't find the bug in the software, but I found the
mm,
bug in Vernon's thinking. I found the
mm-hmm,
bug in Jane's code in the PR before it got submitted. I found the bug
uh-huh.
on the story. The story wasn't written well, it was unclear. So in my
Wow.
mind, I didn't prevent anything because also I
Wow.
can't prove that Vernon wouldn't have realized his thinking was slightly off as he was implementing it. So
Indeed.
I just find it really hard in my head to say that how do you prove prevention and then in turn, how would you measure that? But is
There is
finding
such a
bugs earlier prevention?
there is such a thing as a defect prevention rate, which is a ratio of potential defects identified and prevented before coding or early in
Sounds like
the
something
development
Essential would
process.
make up that.
um, yeah, I think that runs into a similar problem to the one you just described, which is how can we measure it? So, to answer that question, one thing that maybe I keep looking over here because I was doing some searching online, so I'm looking on my other screen. Um, I remember I worked at a place, gosh, going back like 10 years now, and it was a massive warehouse. So it's very, they sold physical electrical components and goods and things like that. But they'd also manufacture a lot of those things as well. And so at the office was an office, but it was also a warehouse and a bit of manufacturing, and had labs where they would build things. And one of the things they would measure from a safety point of view was time since last accident.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that could be, because they kind of say, right, so we've put all these measures in place to make sure that there are no accidents. And so the way that we'll measure the success of that is to measure the time since the last one. And obviously the longer the better. Uh, are there any software equivalents to that? I think there's mean time to
Mean time to feed. Oh no. Mean
recovery.
time to feed. Yeah, recovery is one that comes up a lot. But then that's more
I think that's
about.
a DORA one, isn't it? Is that a
Yeah, that
DORA
is a
one? Pretty
DORA
sure
one.
it
But
was.
isn't that more about how quickly you recover, not necessarily like because what I'm seeing here is like, and I'm immediately drawn to the meme, right? As in, oh, like if let's say we did time since last bug in production, right?
Mm,
My brain's immediately, well, there isn't. There's thousands of bugs in production. We've just not found them yet. Like so, like as in people think that their software is brilliantly bug free, right? But
hmm
then it gets specific though. It's like time since a bug that mattered, right? But then if you have a definition of a bug such as Jerry's one, right, something that bugs someone who matters, then
mm.
you're almost saying like time since the last bug is actually quite good. But that doesn't prove the prevention of bugs, though, in my opinion. Just means we've not found it.
Well, I don't know. I don't. So here's the thing. I don't know if. Well, mate, I just thought of Jerry again. So I don't know if it's a direct measure, but it might be a proxy because the gamble, the bet that you're making, the prediction, the hypothesis you're making is if we take certain steps to prevent bugs, it would mean I'm looking at the DORA metrics over here. It would mean like the change failure rate would go down. You'd expect it to go down. You'd expect the mean time to recovery to go down, to get better. That's a nice little swerve. To get better, to improve. The lead time for changes, you'd expect that to get shorter, right? So you could use it as a measurement for your prevention efforts, right? Because that's what that's about. You're saying, the Accelerate book. Shout out to Dr. Nicole Forsgren et al. They're saying, hey, if you do all of these things, you have some outcomes. If you measure these 4 things, they should all move in the direction that we want them to move in. And
Yeah.
a lot of those changes were changes around the way that you would work and the way that you would slice up the work and the way that you would approach the work and all this kind of jazz, right? So I reckon, and I don't think that's, well, I nearly said I don't think that's too much mental gymnastics. I actually don't think that's any mental gymnastics required at all. I think that's a pretty reasonable way to put it.
I agree with all those 4 as higher metrics, but if you were trying to tie that specifically to the prevention of bugs, I think
Mm-hmm.
there's so much other things that get done to help those metrics be what they are, right? So I think they're amazing metrics to have, but they're not ultimately tied to the lack of bugs, right? It's
No, no, and
it's just
I'm not
good.
claiming that either. They're not.
Yeah, I know you're not. Yeah, I know you're
No,
not. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
just for the
yeah,
people
yeah.
listening.
Very true.
And I'm
Very
also
true.
not. I'm trying to avoid shifting out of QA into the QE space because these feel very QE numbers to me.
I'd say I
Because
don't think so.
because
I don't
oh,
think so.
okay, right. Well, we'll get to that bit then. But yeah, so okay, I get what you're saying, right? So somehow measuring prevention of issues, bugs, complaints, whatever it might be, is that what you're trying to not what you're trying to say? Is that a good metric for QA, as in assuring quality?
I think so because I'm sort of making this up because I don't think I've ever thought about it in this way before. But just thinking it through from that initial definition of, well, if QA is about preventing bugs, how would we measure it? You're looking from the out, so you'd change the process and then you'd hope that something changed. And so you would hope that you would ship less bugs is one of the outcomes of preventing bugs is, we've made these changes because we think we're shipping too many bugs. So we make the change and we hope that number goes down.
Yeah. Cause
Bearing in mind everything that you just said around, well, there's other stuff going on as well. So you have to be mindful that you're not
yeah,
attributing the change to
I don't.
the wrong thing.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I had anything that sounded like a bell because I've just remembered Keith Glenn every time you mentioned Jerry Weinberg. I'm going to mention Jerry Weinberg
Ding,
again, right? Because
ding.
I'm doing that thing where everyone hates when you unravel words and you start looking at the definition of words, right?
That's got
But
to be done. Got to be done.
quality assurance, right? So
Oh,
quality, Jerry, value to some person, right?
yep.
So I'm almost unraveling my thinking as I'm speaking to you, which is that what is the value people want? Because when you were talking a minute ago, I put customer love down, right? So environment could be full of bugs, but no one cares about them. They're not impacting the value, right? The journey's not as good as it could be, but people are still buying. We're making loads of money. Everyone's quite happy. The customers are getting their stuff. They're happy, right? But there's 100 bugs in prod. But the customers are happy. The people who matter, the value to some person, let's say the customers, and the business is happy, but then
Yep.
engineering's unhappy, right? So everyone else is
Mm.
happy, but engineering's not happy because they're like, well, we think this software's crap. Yeah, it's working. But like I don't want to use the word perfectionist, right? But as someone who wants to achieve high levels of quality in the engineering space,
Mm-hmm.
they're probably not as happy, but the business is so happy. Customers loving it. Like, so I think that when you say quality assurance, it's like you've almost got to go back to say, well, who? Quality to who? Who are the people that we're trying to work for here? Is it the business? Is it the customers? Is it engineering? And I think QA has predominantly been the business and the end customer,
I
not
don't think it is.
not the engineers, maybe.
See, this is why I was saying I wanted to come back to it later because I think when you add the business into it, that's the thing because that is the main thing for that scenario you just described. I've worked in plenty of companies that are in that situation where the engineering function is saying this product is very difficult to maintain. It's very difficult to update because this technology is old and it's a bit clunky and things have evolved from when we introduced it. It made sense at the time. You fast forward 5, 10, however many years later, we should probably change it. This part of the system that deals with, a particular kind of customer, a particular kind of scenario. If we were off air, I'd be telling you exactly who this is. It's a real pain to the point where people in teams would avoid making changes in this part of the code. It was such a pain in the bum. But because it's making money, because the money metric, the revenue metric is going up, the profit metric is going up, powers that be are saying, so we could invest in making those changes that you suggest, dear engineering team, but we're raking it in. So it's a no from me. Continue wading through all the treacle and the difficulty and the stress and all the rest of it, because we are making money. They're not thinking about developer experience, not thinking about maintainability for whatever reason. Maybe we in the engineering team and our pals in the product side of the things haven't made the case well enough. Maybe it's on us. Maybe we have made the case well enough and the business have, which is their right to do, the owners, the actual leaders, the exec folks, board, whoever have said, nah, we're not investing that money in that because we're rinsing. we're making plenty of cash, shareholders are happy, bonuses are nice and fat and swollen, so we won't do it. But I think I do think that when we start talking about the business, I think that's where we start to get really, I think that's the factor that turns the metrics, makes them really powerful and persuasive, because you could have DORA metrics that are all absolutely amazing, but if no one's buying the thing, who cares? You know what I mean? If no one's using your product or service, who cares?
At that point, though, do you think it falls under any of our terms at that point, right? Because, is that a business sales metric outside of the engineering space? Which, let's just assume QA, QE, testing all fit within this engineering bubble. Or is it that QA or QE, because I said QA, is it that QA comes out of the engineering bubble and into the business? Let's say it's a Venn diagram. Because I still feel like, again, it comes back to QA, who, if you did that value to someone who matters angle, and the only people that matter are the people making the money, and that's written down, that's agreed with everyone, the metrics are good. Everyone's happy, even though we're not happy, but we don't matter. If you, in that definition,
from that, exactly. I think so. I think that bloody hell, the Jerry Weinberg show. So I am pretty sure that I read Jerry say words to the effect of, is it Jerry or is it another book? Anyway, so you're driving and your speedometer is like a first order metric, but it doesn't tell you how well you're driving or how appropriate that is. You could say, if you're driving 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, is that good driving or bad driving? And because it's you've probably thought of at least 200 different reasons why it might be amazing driving or why it might be terrible driving, right? The list, the more you think about it, the longer that list gets. Well, it depends if this or it depends if that or what's going on here and this, that, and the other, and blah, blah. But what it should trigger is curiosity to say, well, what else is going on? But so I think as soon as you start to add these reasons, I think that question about who matters, I think for me that's when it takes the metrics out of testing and QA into quality engineering, because quality engineering that's when you start to ask that question. It's value to somebody who matters. So who are these people and what matters to them? What do they value?
Yeah. And
then you can start to say, well, the mean time to recovery matters to this particular category of person for this reason, and it matters to this person for a different reason potentially. And you can do that with every single metric. And I think that's what gives it the powers, when you can start saying, oh, well, because I know you care about making money, here's how this thing we're measuring, whatever it is, impacts that thing that you care about.
So the thing that's in my head, two things, just to go back one step, is I've heard that someone say something about the 50 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour thing,
Yeah.
and then the punchline was that it was in the dark and the headlights weren't on, or something like that. As in, like, when you look at the dashboard, it's like it wasn't. It was something to do with going 50 in a 50, but like you didn't have your headlights on. Then the other one is what I'm currently thinking, and I don't know if it's true because I've never really had the QA manager role, but was QA and sorry, I'm going to try and my brain's running at 1,000 mile an hour here, right? So I've always remembered the people make analogies to manufacturing when they talk about QA, right? So when people talk
Okay.
about QA, it's like, well, we built a car, and now we need to build every other car the same as that car, right? And people describe that as being QA, right? We've made a recipe,
Okay.
and now every jar of sauce we produce has to have this much percent of salt, sugar, spice, whatever, right? Because then we know that it's going to be very close to that original recipe. And all those analogies, what they all miss is they miss the fact that they've made that recipe, or not that recipe, they've done 1,000 other recipes and done endless testing and cycles and fine tuning and everything. And in the car analogy, they've crashed hundreds of these cars into brick walls, right? They've re-engineered every single part 1,000 times, right? But that wasn't part of QA because that was part of building the car, right? It wasn't the actual
Was that part of product
prototyping or
development?
whatever. Yeah, whatever you want to
Prototype.
analogy
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
call
yeah.
it.
Exactly. R&D,
But then,
all that stuff.
so what I'm thinking here, though, in the testing or QA space, and what I was trying to get to was when I've had the QA manager role twice, I think, and I think I inherited someone else's metrics. So my job was to just basically assure against the standards that have been defined already by somebody else. So my job was just to do endless work, whatever it is, testing, automation, deployment stuff, whatever it was, right? Just to keep those numbers in a healthy place. And now, are you now saying that not like QE is actually going a level above that and working out what those numbers should be from the wider business, right? So am I making sense? I almost feel QA is
Yeah.
someone's defined the numbers for you. These are the numbers, go work on it, make sure they stay good. Whereas you're kind of saying that QE is that wider, you're almost saying engineering quality across the whole of the business, not just within software. And I think most people think QE is solely the engineering box. It's how can we
I
do engineering as good as possible, not
I
how
think
can we engineer quality in the wider business.
I think I feel like what I'm talking about is is establishing meaning to the
Okay.
metric. And it does start and it it might also include what you're talking about from the point of view of, because I've been on teams where you start grumbling about the sales team because they've cut a deal with an amazing customer, but they've promised
Yeah.
them something that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard. They said, yes, dear customer, we can build you 2 unicorns and you can have them yesterday. And then they give you that deal and say, hey, we've closed a new deal. You need to create, a herd of unicorn, and you need to also build a time machine because they want it last week. Like, well, that's going to be hard. And so that's an example of kind of looking beyond the engineering and saying, here's how things outside of engineering or impacting things in engineering. And if we change some of those things, here's how we could make those outcomes better. So yeah, it could mean moving from looking for bugs in the product to looking for bugs in the system being the business that
Yeah.
produces the outcome for some customers. But I'm talking about like the meaning, like what's the impact of increasing a given metric to the business? Because then you can start to have a bunch of different interesting conversations potentially, which is, well, we've got this hypothesis that if we change this thing over here, this number is going to go in the right direction that represents better, whether it's up or down. Odds are, though, that's not the only thing that's going to change. Something else is going to change. And so if we can't articulate the benefit to whichever stakeholder, oh, bro, my guy.
He's never normally
If
here.
you
We
can't,
normally record on a Wednesday.
I know.
And he's just sat down here going at my feet. Go on,
I
if
miss
you
that
can't
guy.
articulate.
If you can't articulate, if you can't speak to that meaning, if you don't have any idea what that means, the metric, the impact of changing that metric to whichever stakeholder, I'll just use the business because why not? Then I think that puts you at a disadvantage, I think.
Yeah, it does. I'm still.
And you know, you can have a conversation that says, hey, we've made this metric better, which is what you originally wanted to do, right? You originally want to say, we are getting better at X. And you could be getting better at X, but if no one cares, or if the wrong set of people do care because they don't want you to, because it's having some other second or third order effect, that's problematic. That can cause you a lot of grief.
Is that not true of any metric, regardless of whether it comes
Yeah,
under the umbrella of QE, QA, or testing? Because
man.
what I'm still hung up on is not like, I'm trying to think of, and I've made a realization during this that for me, quality engineering I've almost exclusively kept it inside the bubble of what people consider engineering.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I've not done the other work. I do that, but I've never probably put it underneath the term of quality engineering. So for me, like, just to like looking at how long we've been going, right? Some of the quality engineering metrics that come to my mind is the DORA ones, because they focus on engineering, right? But I don't think I've put enough thought into some quality engineering metrics that aren't related to engineering, right? Because, and what the scenario I was thinking when you were speaking was, right, our lead time to change is like 10 minutes. I'm just making it up, right? But yeah, it's a day,
minimal.
right? Our change failure rate, zero, right? Or whatever scale
well
that is good.
Yeah.
We're deploying 20,000, 50 million, trillion times a day, right? Absolutely smashing it, right? Pipeline's on fire. Our mean time to recovery is, well, it don't matter because we never fail. So it doesn't matter what the mean time is.
The last time we failed, it was nanoseconds.
Honestly, someone looked at it and it fixed itself, right? So we're absolutely smashing it, right? Our customer love, right, is through the roof, right? 100% from every customer, right? But we've only got 10 customers.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Is that a quality? Is that quality? Is the lack of customer, let's say assume that let me assume that is a metric we were measuring. Where would that metric fit in? So number of active customers, where's that metric falling under our QE, QA testing? Or is it not underneath any of them?
I would put it under QE.
Interesting.
Personally.
Even though that's a business metric, a wider business one.
Because it's a bit, quality engineering for me is about the business.
Interesting. I don't think people think that way.
When I maybe I'm an outlier, but when I think about quality engineering, I'm going outside of engineering in some way, shape, or form, because I need to know what is the point of doing all of this work. Like, none of it matters until I pull back and see enough of the system. Because I think your example is a good one. That's what I was trying to talk about earlier. It's like you've got 10 customers. Is that good or is that bad? Is it good because last week you had one customer, or is it bad because last week you had 100 and you've churned 90? What the hell is even churn?
I agree with you, but I don't. This is a pure guess. Perhaps I'm the outlier, or perhaps you're the outlier. I don't know. One of us might be, right? But I feel that I probably go in reverse more than down. So I'm probably looking at a ticket and thinking, how do I test this ticket, or how do I know we're shipping the right thing here? And then I'll work my way back up to find out why this ticket got made in the first place. What were the reasons for it? And I'm mostly doing that in reverse, I feel, in the roles that I've had. Perhaps I've never been high up enough to be in the conversations that have led to the tickets. And that's probably not accurately true. But like, I think generally, I don't think people are involved that. I think a lot of the time it's, here's the epics. here's the tickets, and then we're asking those questions, because we're not like talking about shifting left now in my head. Sorry, my brain's running 1,000 miles an hour. I've already
Yeah, let's
said,
go.
right?
Let's go, man.
Now we're talking about shifting left, right? Again, I think people could. I'm not going to Google it, but like if we Googled shifting left, I reckon it probably says, stories requirements. I don't think it says all the way left to the, why the hell we will, why does that story exist, or why does that epic exist? It's more, how do we now make that epic and that story as good as it can be? You would no doubt be reaching over there, bringing little nuggets of information back.
You'd be having a little peek at the very least, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
You'd be
but you're not over here though. You're not in that in that bucket, in that vertical. You're just dipping in and out.
And I've made the argument in the past, distant past, recent past, to kind of say, we need, whatever you want to call that perspective that your typical QE, and I said QE deliberately.
Yeah.
But if you want to say tester, I don't care. It still applies. You want whatever that, special sauce that they bring to the delivery.
Yeah.
You want to spread that. See, I'm stretching this analogy as far as we'll go. You want to spread that beautiful sauce over the whole, as much of the process as possible. So when I use the term shift left, I actually just mean, shift in all the directions. Yeah, well, but also beyond where the term shift left only makes sense when you think about old school waterfall delivery. So when I started working in software in the early 2000s, that was the dominant way of delivering stuff. You'd have all the different phases, right? And the testing would happen in a particular phase.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward however many years, and suddenly it's like, well, we need to bring all of that work and all that thinking forward. Bring it earlier, bring it to the left. But also now we need to bring it beyond that, because you want to be able to say, as early as possible, how would we know that this deliverable, this new capability, is working?
Yeah.
So and by working means solving a specific problem for a specific customer. How do we know that we've had the impact for our customers after we've stopped testing?
No, it makes sense. I did Google it in the end, and again, it terminology is the software development life cycle, right? So again, I feel like that is the starting point of that is usually some epic, some stories.
Is engineering.
And that's what people, the engineering. And I think a lot of people assume QE, and I'm pretty sure I'm one of them now, is making sure
I'm talking about product development.
Yeah, you're more, I'm now thinking out like you're almost product quality.
Hell yeah. Why do you think so many good testers end up in product development as product owners, and they do a good job of it?
Oh, so I'm not saying, sorry, just to be clear, I'm not saying anyone can't do it. I'm just trying to think of the terms that we started the last episode with. Yeah,
that was a royal nuke.
I'm trying to think of the terms we started the last episode with. I think if I try and summarize where we're at, I think testing metrics are very much focused on throughput and bugs, right? It's how quick are you doing the testing, how many tests you do, and how many bugs you find.
And those things are worth measuring for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Then if we go, and then inside that testing term, we have automation now, which has its own set of metrics, and I get why they exist. Because you could argue, you could probably apply DORA to most of test automation if you really wanted to think about it that way. Well, we used to do that in AI team, but we would talk about mean time to feedback. So how long does it take to get the feedback from your automated test? But as you do keep saying, I don't teach it anymore, and there's so much knowledge in those slides that doesn't exist anywhere. Then there was a kind of testing bubble, right? Then we've said QA, which, whether we're accurate in our definition or not, for the sake of these podcasts, prevention, right? So we mentioned a few things around prevention, which I can't remember what they were now. But
since last blog.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And then issues in live and yeah. Oh, yeah. What was it? I wrote it down. You said, what was it you said again? Time since last accident, that kind of angle. Yeah. And then QE, I think DORA applies perfectly to the way I was viewing QE as QE being doing engineering better,
Mhm.
having the highest quality or the top quality. I don't know what the word is, right? Because quality always comes into it, but a high performing team and doing engineering at its pinnacle, like pushing the
Mhm.
boundaries of that and doing it well, but doing it in a still not just focusing on engineering, though, still making sure it's working for the business. As I said, that
Mhm.
reaching in to the business like section. I'm going to put them up here because usually it's a hierarchy, right? I'm reaching up here to get some nuggets about why we're building A, why we're building B, how do we know A and B have had a positive impact. But then
Mm.
mostly I'm on how are we going to build that in the best way possible. Whereas
Yeah.
now you've got me thinking about, what's going on up here. Does QA live up here too? Does it reach in here? Should it be something else? Because I'm still,
My
and I go, I don't know, because hopefully the listeners will tell us. I still think most people are sat in that engineering box, and it's great because at least we've made our box bigger. But I still
I don't
think they're
think it's
stuck in here.
wrong. I don't
Yeah,
think it's objectively wrong. I just think if you're able to articulate the impact of the work you're doing in engineering to the wider business, I think that's when you start to get more influence and more leverage. Because you
yeah.
can't expect, I talk about this all the time. I don't care. I'm going to keep talking about it.
Sales.
If it's sales, bro, like it doesn't matter. You can't. So I'm line managing into a CTO, and he is very much of the yeah, but so what? So you've done X, Y, and Z, but so what? Like, why should I care about that? And if I keep talking about things from my perspective, saying, well, because this is why it's important to testers and testing. It's I'm like you said earlier. It's like I'm an artiste and a perfectionist about testing, and my testing sensibilities say that we need to do it this way.
Yeah,
But none of those things are things that he finds compelling.
yeah.
Something is going wrong somewhere. We
I
need to
think
be
that
able to articulate things in a way that is compelling to whoever they is in that particular conversation.
And I think where I'm at, and again, let's try and lead into future episodes because it also helps me
Yeah,
and you, right? Is
yeah.
I agree. I absolutely I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Mhm.
I'm now wondering what role does that work? Because it feels more like a role for me rather than QE. And then I think it might be characteristics of that role because I don't think most QEs have that access and that power. And you've got QEs underneath you, right? Because I know where you work, right? And then
Mhm.
I don't know what your current job title is, right? But you're talking to the CTO, and I almost feel a lot
PBS.
of those
Yeah.
metrics, senior engineering manager. So
Mm.
yeah, so this is interesting now because a lot of great testers have become engineering managers, and I'm just
Why do you think
wondering.
that is?
Yeah,
That's
no,
something
no,
that I've talked about.
I knew you were gonna say that too, but I'm just thinking of the bucket of QE. It
Mm.
it has an impact on engineering managers and CTOs, but also
Yeah.
very much in my space now. Without I've still got a lot of unknowns in my space, right? But QA isn't a role, so if it's no longer a role, then it almost feels easier to talk about it from a this is how role A, role B, role C, role D influences
Mhm.
quality and how they're engineering quality for themselves. Whereas I think because it has become a role, it and it became a role for very valid reasons, right? I know we're at the end, right? But it became a role for valid reasons
Mm.
because there's so much you can do and people just simply
Mhm.
don't have the skills all the time, right? And over the years to come, that will change because the more
Yeah.
people do it, the more it will become ingrained, right? But at the moment, or when the QE role came out, yeah, we hope it wasn't happening. But yeah, now I'm starting to feel like I don't know what the next episode should be, but yeah, like the relationship between QE and engineering managers, QE and CTOs, the
Hell yeah.
practice for the practice versus the people, like something along those lines. Because the more we're unraveling really good stuff here, at least for me anyway. And we only record this for me and Vernon's own self journeys, right? We just like to share it with you.
Later.
Um, but
Later.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh
this is
yeah.
this is
We should
fascinating.
we should talk about that in the next episode. So the next episode will
But
be about.
Yeah, we've hit
those
the hour
relations.
mark. So, with a bit of editing,
Yeah.
we'll get it under the hour. So yeah,
Yeah.
let us know, right? Let us know if you have a role in any of these titles, boxes, whatever we've been discussing, what do you do? Who do you report to? What influence do you have? But then also, what metrics are you currently using to know that
That's
you're doing your job well?
that's the
Because
I want to know what metrics people are using. And
absolutely.
I'm absolutely stealing some of these ideas, doing some crowdsource work for my day job. So yeah,
Awesome.
I want to know what metrics they're using and how they found them useful. Which metrics have they tried that weren't useful and why? That would be interesting to know. If
Yep.
you wouldn't mind sharing, would appreciate it. But that's it.
Excellent. That's it. All right. Let's wrap it up. Goodbye.
See ya.